Let me tell you about the day my life became a cosmic joke, courtesy of a leather-bound notebook and the worst timing in galactic history. My name is Jake Martinez, and I'm what you might call a professional space janitor. Officially, I'm a maintenance engineer aboard the interstellar research vessel Cosmic Wanderer, but let's be honest here. I fix toilets that work in zero gravity and clean air filters that cost more than my childhood home. The ship is part of humanity's Galactic Friendship Initiative, which is basically our species saying, "Hey aliens, we promise we're not going to shoot you immediately this time." The crew is your typical United Nations fevered dream. We've got Captain Rodriguez, who thinks he's commanding a warship instead of a flying science lab. Dr. Patel, our psychologist, who psychoanalyzes everyone including the coffee machine. And then there's Bert, our ship's AI, whose acronym stands for Basic Emergency Response Technician, but who acts more like a sarcastic teenager with access to the ship's entire database. But the real reason I wake up every morning in this tin can hurtling through the void is Zara Moonwhisper. Yes, that's actually her name. Apparently Valerian parents have the same naming sense as fantasy novel writers on a sugar rush. She's our xenobiology specialist, and she looks like someone crossed an elf with a lava lamp. Her skin has these bioluminescent patterns that shift colors based on her mood, and she's got this laugh that sounds like wind chimes having an existential breakthrough. Oh, and she's telepathic. Which brings us to my diary. See, I'm old school. While everyone else stores their thoughts in digital journals that sync to the ship's network, I write in an actual paper notebook with an actual pen. Call me paranoid, but when your coworker can literally read minds, analog security starts looking pretty appealing. I figured if Zara couldn't access my thoughts digitally, and she was too polite to peek into my brain directly, then my leather-bound fortress of solitude was the perfect place to document my increasingly embarrassing crush. What could possibly go wrong? Everything went wrong on a Tuesday because of course it did. Tuesdays are the universe's way of saying, Monday wasn't quite humiliating enough. I was down in Maintenance Section 7, wrestling with a gravity stabilizer that had decided to interpret up as sideways and down as maybe. The thing was sparking like a 4th of July celebration, and I was elbow deep in its mechanical guts when Bert decided to be helpful. "Jake," came that annoyingly cheerful voice from the wall speaker, "you appear to be experiencing elevated stress levels. Perhaps you should consider relaxation techniques. I have 17,000 meditation apps in my database." "Bert," I grunted, trying to realign a plasma coupling, "unless one of those apps can teach this gravity generator basic directions, keep your wellness tips to yourself." That's when I heard the footsteps. Not the heavy clomping of work boots, but the light, almost musical sound of someone who moves like they're dancing with physics instead of fighting it. "Need assistance?" Zara's voice had this melodic quality that made even the most mundane questions sound like poetry. I turned to see her standing in the doorway, her skin patterns shifting to a concerned blue-green. "Just a stubborn stabilizer," I said, trying to sound casual while my heart decided to audition for a death metal drum solo. "Nothing I can't handle." Of course, that's exactly when Murphy's Law decided to demonstrate why it's a universal constant. I shifted my weight, my tool bag tilted, and my diary, my private, personal, embarrassingly detailed diary tumbled out and hit the deck. In zero gravity, it naturally fell open to the worst possible page. The page where I'd written, and I quote, "Zara's bioluminescent patterns are absolutely mesmerizing. When she concentrates, they pulse in this rhythm that makes me think of heartbeats, or maybe cosmic wind chimes having the best day ever. Today she helped me recalibrate the atmospheric processors. And I spent the entire time trying not to stare at the way her patterns shifted from green to gold when she laughed at my terrible jokes." Zara, being helpful in that uniquely alien way, immediately bent down to pick it up. "You dropped your," she began, then stopped as her eyes focused on the open page. I lunged for the diary like it was a live grenade, which in retrospect, it basically was. "Wait, that's that." But she was already reading. Not just glancing, not just a polite skim, she was actually reading, line by line in complete silence. Her bioluminescent patterns shifted through colors I'd never seen before, which I chose to interpret as either fascination or the alien equivalent of calling security. "Give that back," I yelped, making another grab for it. She stepped aside with that fluid grace that made human movement look like bad stop-motion animation. Still reading. Bert, naturally, chose this moment to provide commentary. "Jake, your heart rate has increased by 47%. Your stress hormones are now at levels typically associated with public speaking or encountering natural predators. Shall I contact medical?" "Shut up, Bert." Shutting up is not in my programming parameters. However, I can offer unhelpful observations about human mating rituals. Did you know that according to my analysis of Earth's romantic comedies, this scenario has a 73% chance of ending in either marriage or restraining orders? Zara was now on page 2. I could see her eyes moving, tracking each humiliating word I'd written about her laugh, her intelligence, the way she made even the most boring staff meetings feel like adventures. My life was officially over. I tried one more desperate lunge for the diary and ended up tangled with a maintenance drone that had wandered into the wrong section. As I hung there, upside down and held by mechanical tentacles, I watched Zara continue reading my emotional suicide note with the focused attention of a scholar studying ancient texts. This was definitely going on my list of worst Tuesdays ever. While I dangled from the maintenance drone like the galaxy's most pathetic pinata, something interesting was happening in Zara's head. Not that I could read minds, that was her department. But her bioluminescent patterns were shifting through a spectrum that looked less like calling security, and more like processing unexpected data. Here's what I didn't know: Zara Moonwhisper, telepathic extraordinaire, had been deliberately staying out of my head this entire time. Turns out, human thoughts taste like carbonated anxiety mixed with caffeinated chaos, and most telepaths avoid us like we're broadcasting mental static on all frequencies. "Your species thinks very loudly," she'd once explained to Dr. Patel, and usually about 17 different things simultaneously. It's like trying to listen to a symphony where every musician is playing a different song while someone operates a blender. So while I'd been paranoid about mental privacy, she'd been wearing the telepathic equivalent of noise-canceling headphones whenever humans were around. My diary-based security system was about as necessary as a screen door on a spaceship. As she read, Zara was finally understanding why I'd been acting so weird around her. The sweating, the stuttering, steam, the way I'd offer to help with her work and then stand there like a malfunctioning android. She'd been interpreting all of this as possible symptoms of human neurological disorders. "Fascinating," she murmured, turning to page 3. "I thought you might be developing some form of species-specific dementia." "What?" I squeaked from my upside-down position. "The behavioral patterns," she explained, not looking up from the diary. "Random perspiration, verbal incoherence, repetitive helpful gestures. Dr. Patel's xenopsychology textbook suggested these could indicate deteriorating neural function in human males between ages 25 and 35. Bert chimed in helpfully. "Actually, according to my analysis of human romantic behavior patterns, those symptoms more commonly indicate." "We get it, Bert," I snapped. That's when Captain Rodriguez decided to make his grand entrance. Marcus Rodriguez had the kind of presence that filled a room even when the room was a cramped maintenance bay. He took one look at the scene, me hanging from a drone, Zara reading my diary, various tools floating in zero gravity, and sighed the sigh of a man who'd seen too much cosmic weirdness. "Do I want to know?" he asked. "Jake appears to be experiencing a romantic crisis," Bert announced. "I'm documenting it for future analysis of human mating behaviors." "Bert, I swear I will reprogram you to only speak in limericks," I threatened. Dr. Patel chose that moment to float into the bay, probably drawn by the commotion or maybe just bad timing. She immediately went into psychologist mode. This is fascinating. A textbook example of cross-species emotional miscommunication. Zara, how are you processing Jake's written emotional expressions? They're very detailed, Zara said, flipping to page 4. And surprisingly poetic for someone who fixes gravity generators. My face was now approximately the same color as a Martian sunset. Could everyone please stop analyzing my feelings like they're a science experiment? But they are, Dr. Patel said with the enthusiasm of someone who'd just discovered a new disorder to classify. Interspecies relationships represent one of the most complex challenges in xenopsychology. Captain Rodriguez held up a hand. Okay, everyone take a breath. Jake, get down from there. Zara, maybe consider that some things are private? The maintenance drone finally released me, and I floated down with all the dignity of a deflating balloon. Zara was still reading, now with what I could only describe as intense concentration. This entry from last Tuesday is particularly illuminated, she said. You wrote, when Zara explained quantum mechanics to the new cadets, she made it sound like poetry. I spent the entire lecture trying to figure out if I'm more impressed by her intelligence or just completely lost in those color patterns. Probably both. Definitely both. I buried my face in my hands. This is how I die. Not from space pirates or black holes, but from embarrassment in a maintenance bay. That's when Zara finally looked up from the diary, her patterns shifting to something I'd never seen before, a warm, pulsing gold that seemed almost pleased. Jake, she said quietly, why didn't you tell me sooner? The maintenance bay went dead silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems and my heart trying to escape through my rib cage. Everyone was staring at me like I was about to deliver the most important speech in galactic history, when all I wanted to do was find the nearest airlock and take a quick walk outside without a helmet. What? I managed, which showcased exactly why I'd been keeping my feelings in writing instead of attempting actual communication. Zara stepped closer, still holding my diary but treating it like it was something precious instead of evidence of my complete inability to function around attractive telepaths. Her bioluminescent patterns had settled into that warm gold color, pulsing gently like a heartbeat made of light. This, she said, gesturing to the diary, explains so much. I thought you were ill. Ill? I squeaked. What kind of ill? Human neurological dysfunction. The sweating, the stammering, the way you'd offer to help me with simple tasks and then stand there looking lost. She tilted her head in that way that made her look like she was listening to music only she could hear. I kept meaning to suggest you see Dr. Patel. Dr. Patel perked up. Actually, I did notice some concerning behavioral patterns. Not helping, Captain Rodriguez muttered. I finally found my voice, though it came out sounding like I'd been breathing helium. You thought I had brain damage? It seemed the most logical explanation, Zara said matter-of-factly. Humans are already neurologically chaotic. When you started exhibiting additional irregular behaviors specifically around me, I hypothesized some form of species-specific cognitive decline. Bert decided to contribute his wisdom. For reference, human romantic interest typically manifests through what appear to be symptoms of minor mental distress. Heart rate elevation, increased perspiration, difficulty with speech patterns, and repetitive helpful behaviors. It's quite similar to panic responses, actually. Thanks for that analysis, Dr. Bert, I said sarcastically. You're welcome. I've been studying human courtship rituals from your entertainment databases. Did you know that in 78% of your romantic comedies, this exact scenario leads to either a dramatic kiss or someone running away? The statistical probability of... Bert, Captain Rodriguez warned. Meanwhile, Zara was still looking at me with those large, luminous eyes that seemed to see right through me. Which, given her telepathic abilities, they probably could if she wanted to. I deliberately avoid reading human minds, she said quietly, as if she'd heard my thoughts anyway. Your mental patterns are intense. like trying to focus while standing next to a thunderstorm. I thought keeping your diary was simply a human organizational method. Wait, I said, my brain finally catching up to the conversation. You've been staying out of my head this whole time? Of course. Mental privacy is fundamental to healthy relationships, whether they're professional or, she paused, her patterns shifting to a softer shade, or something else. Dr. Patel couldn't contain herself. This is a perfect example of cultural miscommunication. Jake assumed Zara was reading his thoughts, so he used written communication. Zara respected his mental privacy, so she couldn't understand his behavioral changes. Both parties were operating under incorrect assumptions about the other's capabilities and intentions. So I've been paranoid about mind reading for no reason? I asked. Completely paranoid, Zara confirmed, and I swear there was amusement in her voice. Though I must say, your writing is quite eloquent. This passage about my laugh sounding like cosmic wind chimes having the best day ever is particularly creative. My face probably achieved a new level of red that hadn't been discovered by science yet. You weren't supposed to read that part. Jake, she said, stepping even closer, why didn't you just tell me you were interested? All of this, she gestured to the diary, could have been a simple conversation. Before I could answer, Captain Rodriguez cleared his throat. Perhaps we should give them some privacy for. That's when the ship shuddered. Not the gentle vibration of normal space travel, but the kind of violent shaking that meant something was very, very wrong. Emergency lights began flashing, and Bert's voice took on that particular tone that meant we were probably about to die. All hands to emergency stations. We have encountered a gravitational anomaly. Repeat, gravitational anomaly detected. This is not a drill, though I wish it were, because drills are much less likely to result in everyone becoming cosmic pancakes. The romantic moment was officially over. Time to see if humans were as good at not dying in space as we were at making everything unnecessarily complicated. Within 30 seconds, the cosmic wanderer went from awkward romance in a maintenance bay to everyone's probably going to die horribly in space, which honestly felt like an improvement in terms of my stress levels. The ship bucked like an angry horse as we were pulled toward what the sensors were cheerfully identifying as a collapsed star, basically a stellar corpse with the gravitational stationality of a cosmic vacuum cleaner set to maximum suck. Report. Captain Rodriguez barked into his communicator as we all grabbed whatever looked sturdy enough to keep us from becoming human projectiles. Bert's voice crackled through the comm system with barely controlled panic. We're caught in the gravity well of a neutron star. The engines are at full reverse, but we're still being pulled in at current rate of acceleration. We have approximately 14 minutes before we reach the event horizon and discover what happens when humans are compressed into the density of atomic nuclei. Options? The captain demanded. Panic? Bert suggested helpfully. I'm told humans find panic quite therapeutic in crisis situations. Dr. Patel was frantically consulting her datapad. The Valerian emergency protocols suggest meditation and accepting our fate with cosmic grace. That's not helpful. I shouted over the sound of straining metal. Zara's patterns had shifted to rapid, strobing colors I'd never seen before. Our navigation computers can't calculate an escape trajectory. The gravitational forces are too chaotic. That's when it hit me. While everyone else was consulting their advanced alien technology and sophisticated computers, I was staring at my diary, still clutched in Zara's hands. An idea started forming, the kind of stupid, human idea that makes perfect sense when you're about to become stellar debris. Give me that, I said, grabbing the diary from Zara. Jake, this isn't the time for journaling. Captain Rodriguez snapped. But I was already flipping to the back pages, where I kept my maintenance calculations. Bert, I need you to display the ship's current trajectory and all gravitational force vectors on the main screen. Jake, our computers can't. Just do it. What? The holographic display flickered to life, showing our ship as a tiny dot being pulled inexorably toward the neutron star. I stared at the complex web of gravitational forces, then started scribbling in my diary with the intensity of a man whose life depended on basic math. "What are you doing?" Dr. Patel asked. "Something stupid," I muttered. "Calculating angles and force vectors the old-fashioned way." "Bert, what's the exact power output of our engines?" "Jake, the computer says." "Forget what the computer says. I need the manual specifications. The ones written in the technical documentation that nobody reads because we have fancy AI." While Bert rattled off numbers, I was drawing diagrams in my diary like a madman. Triangulation of forces, velocity calculations, the kind of basic physics that humans had been doing with pencil and paper for centuries before we had computers to do it for us. There, I jabbed my pen at a specific point in my calculations. "Bert, if we pulse the engines and sequence 30% power for 2.3 seconds, then full power for exactly 1.7 seconds, then cut engines completely, we can use the neutron star's own gravity to slingshot us out." "That's impossible," Zara said. "The computational requirements alone are simple if you don't overthink them," I interrupted. "Sometimes you need to write things down and think them through instead of relying on fancy telepathic computers." Captain Rodriguez was staring at my diary like it might explode. "You calculated an escape trajectory by hand?" "Humans have been doing orbital mechanics with paper and pencil since before we left Earth," I said. "We went to the moon with computers less powerful than Bert's joke database." "My joke database is quite sophisticated," Bert protested, then paused. "Actually, Jake's calculations appear to be correct. Initiating manual engine sequence in 3, 2, 1. The ship lurched violently as the engines fired in the precise sequence I'd written down. For a moment that felt like an eternity, we hung suspended between life and cosmic compression. Then, like a stone from a slingshot, we shot away from the neutron star and back into normal space. The emergency lights stopped flashing. The terrible groaning of stressed metal faded to the normal hum of a ship that wasn't actively trying to kill us. "Well," Captain Rodriguez said into the sudden silence, "that's going in my report under impossible things that worked because humans are weird." Zara was staring at me with something that might have been awe. "You saved us with a diary and basic mathematics." "Sometimes the old ways work," I said, trying to sound casual while my hands were still shaking from the adrenaline. "Advanced civilizations can be great, but there's something to be said for keeping things simple." "Indeed," Bert chimed in. "I'm updating my database to include human stubbornness as a valid problem-solving methodology." Dr. Patel was already taking notes. "Fascinating. The human tendency to maintain primitive skills alongside advanced technology may represent an evolutionary advantage in crisis situations." But I wasn't really listening to the analysis. I was looking at Zara, whose bioluminescent patterns had settled into that warm gold again, and thinking that maybe it was time to try some of that simple, straightforward communication I'd just proven could work wonders. "So," I said, "about what we were discussing before we almost became neutron star food." 3 days later, I was sitting in the ship's observation deck with Zara, watching the stars drift by and writing in my diary. Yes, still the same physical diary. You'd think after saving everyone's lives with analog calculations, I'd have learned to embrace digital technology. You'd be wrong. "You know," Zara said, reading over my shoulder with permission this time, "I could help you transfer this to the ship's computer system. It would be more efficient." I looked up from where I was writing about our first official date, which had consisted of recalibrating atmospheric sensors and sharing terrible jokes about quantum mechanics. "I tried that yesterday, remember?" She laughed, that cosmic wind chime sound that still made my heart do complicated things. "Right. You accidentally sent your feelings to the entire ship." "Captain Rodriguez still won't make eye contact with me," I said, shuddering at the memory. "And Dr. Patel keeps asking how I'm processing my emotional breakthrough." The day after our near-death experience, I decided to modernize my diary system. Seemed logical, right? Voice-to-text, cloud storage, all the conveniences of 24th century technology. What could go wrong? Everything, as it turned out. The voice recognition software interpreted "Dear Diary, Zara and I finally talked about our feelings" as sent to all crew. Zara and I finally talked about our feelings. Followed by 15 minutes of increasingly personal observations that got broadcasted to every terminal on the ship. Bert had been apologetic about the mix-up, in his own way. My sincere apologies, Jake. Though I must say, your accidental ship-wide declaration of affection has been quite educational for my research into human mating rituals. You know what? I said, closing the diary and setting it aside. Paper and pen work just fine. Some things are better when you keep them simple. Zara's patterns shifted to that amused blue-green I'd learned meant she found something endearing rather than concerning. Very human of you. Is that good or bad? It's perfect, she said, and leaned against my shoulder in a way that made the bioluminescent patterns on her skin pulse gently with contentment. Speaking of Bert, our AI had taken inspiration from my diary keeping and started his own digital journal about the crew. We discovered this when Captain Rodriguez tried to access his personal files and found detailed observations like, Day 847, Captain Rodriguez consumed his 5th cup of coffee while muttering about impossible humans. His stress patterns suggest he may actually enjoy the chaos we cause, though he would never admit this aloud. Bert, the captain had said during our next staff meeting, please tell me you haven't been psychoanalyzing all of us. I prefer the term behavioral documentation, Bert replied. Though I must say, Dr. Patel's reaction to discovering Jake and Zara's relationship has provided fascinating insights into human social dynamics. Dr. Patel had indeed been documenting our entire relationship as a case study in cross-species romance. She'd already submitted 3 papers to Xenop Psychology journals with titles like Love and Zero G, a study in human Valerian emotional compatibility. But sitting there in the observation deck, watching Zara's patterns pulse with quiet happiness as she read my latest diary entry about how weird and wonderful our lives had become, I realized something important. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy with their telepathy and quantum computers and the technology that could bend space itself had almost been defeated by a simple gravitational anomaly. It took a human with a notebook and a stubborn insistence on doing math the hard way to save everyone. Maybe that's what humanity brings to the cosmic community. Not the fastest ships or the most elegant solutions, but the weird certainty that sometimes the old ways work better than the new ones. That sometimes you need to write things down by hand, think them through step by step, and trust that simple tools can solve complex problems. What are you thinking about? Zara asked, noticing I'd gone quiet. I picked up my pen and started writing again. Just documenting another day in the life of humanity's most stubborn maintenance engineer and his telepathic girlfriend who never needs to read minds because I write everything down anyway. She laughed, and the sound echoed through the observation deck like music made of starlight. Some things really are better when you keep them simple.